Good morning and welcome to the MAP Talk on COVID-19's impact on small businesses and households. Today, Dr. George Hammond and I will be discussing with you the impacts that we've seen on small businesses and households since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. First, I'd like to go over a little bit of detail for the webinar. You can see here the MAP Talk will be recorded. We'll publish it on the MAP website later this afternoon. Everyone will be in conference mode, meaning you'll be muted. Only George and I will be unmuted. And if you have a question, you can ask them through the Zoom question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the MAP Dashboard sustaining sponsors. Those include Tucson Electric Power, the Thomas R. Brown Family Foundation, and the Freeport McMoran Foundation. Our partners include the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, Pima Association of Governments, Southern Arizona Leadership Council, Sun Corridor, and the University of Arizona. Without their contributions, the MAP Dashboard wouldn't be possible, and webinars like today would not happen. I'd also like to thank our media sponsor, the Arizona Daily Star, and to let you know that we have MAP features the last Sunday of each month on the front page of the business section and the first Monday of each month on the front page of the health section. You can see here in the business section feature, we highlight some of the monthly data, monthly changes in things like employment, unemployment rate, median home price, and that business section feature. And now I'm going to stop screen share and we'll get started.
So Jennifer, I know that over the summer you published articles on the impact of the pandemic on small businesses and households. Can you kind of give us an overview of what you found?
Yes, George, that's right. Last October, we published a series of articles on small businesses. The first one, Small Businesses Disproportionately Impacted by the COVID-19 Pandemic, explored data from the Census Small Business Pulse Survey from April through the end of September. This is weekly data that the census is publishing. So weekly kind of insights into the challenges that small businesses have been facing since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. That article included information on establishments by size for Arizona, Phoenix, and Tucson. The small and medium business group has reported that the smaller a business, the harder it's been hit by the pandemic. And just for reference, in Tucson and Phoenix, more than 50% of businesses in 2018 had less than 5 employees. So more than 50% of all businesses in both Phoenix and Tucson are very, very small, less than 5 employees. For Tucson, in that article, we also broke down the share of a total establishments that are considered small by industry. So if you're interested in industrial mix and for small businesses, you can look at that in that article. The second article we published last fall was Small Business Big Impact, How Arizona's Entrepreneurs Are Coping with Coronavirus. This article examined the Census Small Business Pulse Survey data from April through the beginning of October, and it included detailed trend information on how small businesses view their daily operations. So for example, we had the percent of small businesses experiencing a decline in revenue, decline in employees, and how long a business thinks it's going to take to return to their normal level of operation. In addition to the series of articles that we published on small businesses on the MAP, we also wrote several articles related to how households are faring the pandemic. These articles included exploring eviction trends in Arizona prior to the pandemic and then discussing what might be in store once the moratorium on evictions is lifted. We did a follow-up article to the evictions one that included a detailed analysis of renter and owner occupied housing units by census tract for the entire state. And then we wrote 2 articles at the end of last year exploring the weekly Census Household Pulse Survey data. These articles explored the data as of mid-November and included details on loss of employment by age, percent of adults teleworking by income, food scarcity for households with and without children, share of residents not current on their rent or mortgage, and the percent of households finding it difficult to pay for normal household expenses. At the end of the presentation, I'll screen share again and I'll show you where you can find all of these articles on the MAP dashboard.
Great. Can you kind of bring us up to date? What's the latest that's come out of these surveys?
Yeah, so both the Census Small Business Survey and the Household Pulse Survey were extended to include data into 2021. So they now have like kind of phase 3 data. And earlier this month, we posted an updated article on how small businesses are faring the coronavirus pandemic. And this included updated data through mid-January. And we then also just this week published an article on households that included some of the updated information from what we were looking at last fall, but also included a detailed breakdown of who is teleworking by select characteristics like age, income, and education level.
Good. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And, you know, kind of one of the big things that's come up these days is this whole issue of remote work. And, you know, certainly as we think about Arizona's, you know, population trends, you know, what's going on with housing, commercial real estate is all kind of floating around this issue of remote work. And, you know, migration is a big deal from Arizona. You know, if we can, if the remote work trends turn out to be long lasting, if Arizona can attract, you know, remote workers from other states, that can have a big impact on our population growth, which in turn impacts, you know, house prices, housing affordability. You know, commercial real estate's obviously a big deal. If we're all working from home a lot more in the future than we were in the past, there are implications there for how offices are organized and, you know, how many office buildings we really need. So, you know, is there anything that you can kind of tell us from these surveys about what are the trends in remote work that have emerged?
Yeah, sure. So we typically have tracked working from home measures on the MAP dashboard in our transportation to work indicator since we launched the MAP dashboard 6 years ago. And we know that prior to the pandemic, that about 6.5% of those employed in Arizona worked from home. That increased slightly for the Phoenix metropolitan area to 7%, and it declined a bit for the Tucson metropolitan area with only 5.4% of individuals working from home. The Census Household Pulse Survey began tracking work from home rates in phase 2 of their data collection. So we have a couple months of data available for this. And they've found that the pandemic work from home rate has hovered around 35% for both the US and Arizona. The most recent data from the week of January 20th indicates that Arizona's rate was up slightly to 38.8%. And up even more for Phoenix, with 43% of households in Phoenix having at least one adult working from home. I think we will now screen share so I can show you some of the graphics that are related to this particular data as we talk about it. So here, let me get my screen up. Do you see the?
Yes, I can see it. Yes.
Good, thanks, George. So here in figure 2, this is the data that I was just talking about with 38.8% of those in Arizona working from home. You can see that that rate kind of falls in the middle of other Western states, with places like Utah, Colorado, Washington having rates above 45%. And then California slightly higher there at 41.2%. Nevada has the lowest rate here at 31.2%. This isn't surprising to us. Given the industrial mix of Nevada's largest city, Las Vegas, which has a large portion of service-related jobs, which are really difficult to do from home. So if we break down the data and explore the characteristics by those working from home, we find, if we break it down by age, we find there isn't a lot of variation until you get to the older age groups. And we think that some of this has to do with the way the question is asked, and that these older age groups are reporting that they have no change in work. And that's because especially the 65 and older age group tends to be retired. So they haven't really seen any change in their work during the last year. And that also holds true a little bit for the 55 to 64 age group, where you can see here with the prime working age, that 18 to 54 age group, really consistent work from home rates for the US, the state, and Phoenix. And so here the US is in green, the state in blue, and Phoenix in light blue. If you're interested in, let's say, just the Arizona and Phoenix data, you could click off the US, this graph would regenerate, And now you would have just Arizona and Phoenix. Hover over any of those columns and you'll get the share of those teleworking in Arizona by age. And if you're interested, you can download this data by clicking on this hamburger looking menu here. Go here, download it as a CSV or as an Excel file. Do note though that the data, only the data for the selected geographies will download. So if you have Arizona and Phoenix selected, but not the US, you will only get the data downloaded for Arizona and Phoenix. If you want it for all, then just click back on the US, go up here and download your file. You can also save these images as a PNG, a JPEG, a vector image, or a PDF document. And we encourage you to use all of the visualizations on the map dashboard in your reports, in your presentations, and almost all of the graphics on the map dashboard are interactive like this. You can click on and off geographies, download the data, and save the images. So if we go down, go back to the data, and we look at what's happening by income, we see significantly more variation as we explore the income levels, particularly when we get to the 100,000, those in the 100 to 150,000 or higher income brackets. You see a significant jump up in those working from home, particularly in the state of Arizona. Let's click off here, the US and Phoenix, and you can see that large jump when we get to those higher income brackets for the state. If you look at the US data, it's a little bit more kind of just a small jump up at each income level. But it's clear though that those in those higher income brackets, and particularly 100,000 and above, have higher work from home rates. This is in part due to that a lot of individuals in these higher income brackets have more professional type, work in more professional type industries that make it easier for them to work from home. And this kind of carries over to what we see when we explore the percentage of adults working home by education level. So if we look at, for the US, the percentage of those working from home with a bachelor's degree or higher, 60%, that's 3 times higher than those with a high school degree, which is at 19.6%. And that trend holds for both Arizona and Phoenix. And again, this is because those with a bachelor's degree or higher, again, tend to be in professional type industries, where those that work in service industries or in essential jobs are more likely to not be able to work from a home office. When we look at the data broken down by race and ethnicity, if we click off the US here for a moment, we don't see very much variation in the percentage of those working from home. It's pretty consistent. There's a slight decline for those that are Black and 2 or more races when compared to other races and ethnicities, but it's just slight, couple percentage points. It really stands out here when you click on the US and you see that those that are Asian have a much higher rate of working from home than other races. So that's kind of the breakdown for the working from home, the different characteristics that we explored for working from home in this particular article.
Great. Well, thanks, Jennifer. Well, one of the things that I've been tracking in terms of the forecasting project and kind of thinking about how the recovery was going to play out has been the impact of the federal relief. And at first that was the CARES Act, which estimates suggest that pumped about $30 billion into the Arizona economy through the recovery rebates, the Paycheck Protection Program, unemployment insurance extensions and new programs, and other programs. And, looking back at 2020, that generated a huge increase in Arizona's personal income. In the second quarter of last year, the state saw, a personal income rise 13.4% over the year, followed by a 9.7% increase in the third quarter. So those are really big increases in personal income. And one of the issues that is of concern is what will happen once the federal relief is withdrawn. Now, of course, we had the kind of CARES 2 Act, which was enacted in December. That extended most programs, the UI programs at least, and the eviction moratorium, the mortgage forbearance through March. And it also included another round of recovery rebates, and there was also additional support for renters and landlords included in that as well. The Biden plan, of course, is even bigger at almost $2 trillion. We'll see what happens with that. But part of the concern here is what will happen to household finances once that huge, federal relief is withdrawn, as eventually it will be. Do you have any evidence, Jennifer, from these surveys about, how households have fared through the pandemic and where they stand now financially?
Yeah, so we wrote a bunch of articles in the fall that looked at that in detail. And in this particular article, we included a couple indicators. And I definitely think what we saw, I definitely know what we saw is that at the early stages of the pandemic, and you can see it here in this expected loss in employment income, we saw high levels of households that had an expected loss in income early in the pandemic. And then as the CARES Act and as stimulus payments and uninsurance benefits were increased, we saw this decline over time. And you can see that this was collected in 3 phases. So there are gaps in the data here. This is phase 1 data, phase 2, and then we just began phase 3. And we see that in the week of January 20th, about 24% of households in Arizona expected a loss in at least one adult in the household expected a loss in employment income. And that was down from, highs here that we were seeing at about 38% earlier last year. We also explored added data here at the very end that looked at the share of adults finding it difficult to pay normal household expenses. This is again from the week of January 20th. And in Arizona, that was 34.5% of households were finding it difficult. That fell a little bit for the Phoenix metropolitan area, was slightly lower at 33% in the metro area, Phoenix. Arizona, again, kind of falls in the middle with places like California, Nevada, and Texas having over 40%. And Utah having the lowest rate here at 25.4% of households finding it difficult to pay normal household expenses in that particular week. This again is down substantially from what we saw early in the pandemic in April when the census started collecting data on this. So we have seen some improvement, and that is, kind of directly related to the government supplying the stimulus payments and as well extended unemployment benefits. So George, I know you've been doing a little bit of work on a related topic, and that's the bankruptcy data. You've been working a lot on bankruptcy data. Do you have anything that you want to share related to this with that?
Yeah, absolutely. The bankruptcy story so far is a really interesting one. We track this data on the Arizona's Economy Online magazine at aziaeconomy.org. And what we saw in 2020 was really not necessarily what you would expect, given that the state's going through this, big, essentially a natural disaster that had big economic impacts. Because what we saw was that overall bankruptcies in Arizona fell by about 20% for the year in 2020 compared to 2019. And it seems counterintuitive, given the scale of the job losses that we saw both initially and the job losses that were essentially sustained throughout the year. And, I think the story here really is one of the CARES Act. That pumped a huge amount of money into the state economy, which helped, households and businesses out. And in particular, the mortgage forbearance, student loan forbearance, the eviction moratorium in particular, I think gave people, additional breathing space so that they could avoid filing bankruptcy. Now, of course, the big question is, again, what will happen as that federal relief is withdrawn? And that will happen sometime this year, either in March, if there is no Biden plan, or roughly in September, or the last half of this year under the Biden plan. So, that'll be a big issue, particularly the mortgage forbearance, the eviction moratoria, because the rent is still due. It's piling up there, and once the moratoria end, then that rent will then become due. So that will have some implications that we'll want to keep track of, both on household finances and on house prices potentially. Although I think the impact there will be pretty small, given the migration into the state that we're expecting over the next year or two. Kind of a related phenomenon that we're seeing is a big increase in new business applications. So, those new big business applications typically occur before a business is started and it starts to generate jobs and wages. But, through 2020, we saw big increases in new business applications. That was particularly so in January of 2021. So why would that be happening, given all the economic wreckage that's around? And I think part of it is related to that economic wreckage. People may be looking to start new businesses after one has failed or been, significantly negatively impacted by the pandemic. They may be changing the line of business away from travel and tourism into something that seems more sustainable, given the environment that we're in this year. So, we'll see what happens with these. We'll continue to track those, but I think those will be two key things to keep an eye on going forward.
Yes, definitely. We did that. We wrote that evictions article last year, and we found that eviction rates were really high in Arizona prior to the pandemic when compared to other states. And so that's definitely something that we, as the data becomes available and as the moratorium expires, we will be continuing to look at and continuing to report on both the MAP dashboard and Arizona's economy. We also know in our recent article that we wrote on the the update on small businesses, we found that nearly 75% of small businesses in both Phoenix and the state had reported the coronavirus pandemic had at least a moderate negative impact on their business. Unfortunately, the Census Small Business Pulse Survey and the Household Pulse Survey only reports data for select metropolitan areas. So we've been looking at Phoenix and the state kind of as a proxy for what's going on in Tucson. But 75% of small businesses had at least a moderate negative impact of the coronavirus. So I think this really kind of solidifies what we were finding last fall, in that small businesses in particular have been disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus pandemic. Additionally, small businesses are continuing to report a decline in revenue. During the week of January 10th, 37% of small businesses in Arizona reported a decline in revenue from the previous week. That was below the national rate. And among the Western states, we still see that California is reporting the largest decline in small business revenue at nearly 50% in the week of January 10th. Though these rates are down substantially from early in the pandemic. In April, we were seeing 70% of small businesses reporting a loss in revenue. So a substantial decline. And again, this kind of goes back to the Payment Protection Plan and the CARES Act and the assistance that was provided to small businesses. Small businesses in Phoenix fared slightly better than the state, with 33% reporting a decline in revenue in mid-January. Also, we're seeing that over 40% of Arizona small businesses believe it will take at least 6 months to return to normal operation, while almost 5% think that their business is never going to return to pre-pandemic levels of operation. Those numbers are down slightly than they were, 6 months ago, but still relatively high. A lot of small businesses think it's going to take a long time to return to their normal level of operation, 6 months at least. The small business, I thought it was interesting. A recent question that was added just recently here in phase 3 of the Census Small Business Pulse Survey was a question that asked small businesses if they had increased their use of online platforms to offer goods and services. And I know, George, the work that you do for the Forecasting Project and for Arizona's economy, you have found that both nationally and statewide, there's been a huge increase in remote sales during the coronavirus pandemic. I certainly shop more online than I did prior to the pandemic. And so that data from the Census Small Business Pulse Survey found that almost 25% of his small businesses nationally had increased their use of an online platform during the pandemic. And that was a little bit higher for the Phoenix metropolitan area at 26%. So I think that I'll share the screen now again with you guys so you can see where to find all of these articles on the MAP dashboard. And so we'll go back, and if you just click on the map icon, it will take you right back to the home page. Here we have our 6 categories, and infrastructure is where you can find, in transportation to work is where you can find all of that information we have on work from home prior to the pandemic. Up here is the library link. I'm going to click on that and show you where you can find all of the COVID-19 related articles. If you click on that link, it will take you to a list of everything that we've published since last March, as well as any other articles that we've published related to economy, education. You can just click on those links. And we also have a Southern Arizona communities where we look at information at the community and town level. Click on that and we'll take you to those related articles. So here, the latest article that we just updated is at the top. That's update on small businesses, how small businesses are faring the coronavirus pandemic. So if we go back to the home page, you'll see here at the slideshow, there's that most recent article. It's the first slide. If you go through here and click, it will take you to our more recent articles. Here, if you keep going, you'll find some of those articles we published last fall, taking our economic pulse, how households are faring, rent our own. This is that article that I mentioned where we look at renter and owner occupied housing units by census tract. I clicked on that because I want to show you the map. If you go to the map, it zooms in on Pima County, but if you're interested in information for the entire state, you can zoom out and then kind of just zoom back in to the area you're interested in. So if you want to look at Phoenix, you can just kind of keep zooming in until you get to the Phoenix metropolitan area and look at those census tracts for Phoenix and hover over, and it will give you the percent that's renter occupied in each of those particular census tracts. So we have this was a follow-up article to the evictions article that we wrote. You can find that evictions article in the library section as well. If you go down here, this is our most recent article. It's where you will always find our most recent article. We just published this yesterday, and that was the article I talked about, the work from home, broken down by select characteristics. And then if we go down, I just want to mention that we have a monthly newsletter we send out. We send it out one to two times a month. This keeps you updated on things like today's map talk, on updated data releases, on new feature articles that we've written. And then also you can follow us on Twitter, another great way to stay updated on all of that information. And then I'm going to end here with our high frequency data update. We've been publishing this once a month, and it includes the monthly unemployment, non-seasonally adjusted unemployment data for each of the metropolitan areas. So we've been tracking how that's changing since the beginning of the pandemic. So we typically update this kind of in the first 10 days of the month when the new monthly data is released for the metros. And then below that, you'll find an update that George writes on Arizona, the nation, kind of a weekly update with weekly and monthly data about the impact of COVID on the economy. And so you can find things here like the initial claims for regular unemployment insurance, the hotel occupancy rate, US movie box sales, and the throughput at the airport. And then if you go down to the bottom, you can click on that link to Arizona's economy, and it will take you to the page where you can find all of the graphs and data for this write-up. So with that, I am done with my prepared marks. George, you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, we have a couple questions.
Okay.
So one is about the so-called K-shaped recovery. So this is a recovery that's driven by the idea that lower income households are harder hit by the pandemic, and also that there are significantly bigger impacts of the pandemic on women, and that we also get differences across race and ethnicity. Is there anything in the data that we're tracking across the pulse surveys that might put some hard data to how that's playing out?
Yeah, so the pulse survey is starting to report disaggregated data for some of their questions. And we saw that in what we talked about today, the work from home. And we definitely see this idea that certain households are being hit harder by the pandemic. And even in the work from home article, where we saw that those in the higher income brackets have a higher percentage of those that are working from home, therefore they're better able to shield themselves from the coronavirus. contracting the coronavirus. And so we will continue to explore what data is available from the census household pulse survey, disaggregated by different characteristics, and report on that. We're going to write an upcoming article that looks at education and the impact of households on education for their children because of the coronavirus pandemic, and we'll break that down in as many different ways as we can that's provided by the household pulse survey. And so our plan throughout this year is really to kind of just dig in and look at what's going on now by select characteristics from that data that's being reported.
Oh, great. Thank you. Another question has to do with remote work. Is there anything in the data that Census is putting out or that you're aware of elsewhere that deals with, what's the remote work going to be like post-pandemic?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are asking that question, right? And it's going to depend probably employer to employer. There was a recent article that showed kind of what employees want, and that's about 25% want to stay remote, 100%, about 50% just want more flexibility. They want to be remote a few days. They want to be in office a few days a week. And then another 25% kind of want to be in the office all the time. I know personally, I kind of fit in that 50%. I work remote. I have for 3.5 years now, but I miss the office. And so when I come back to Tucson and work in person in the office several times a year, and it's nice. If I was in Tucson all the time, then I would kind of be in that 50%. A couple days at home, a couple days in the office. It's nice. I know you, George, you're already back in the office. You want to be in the office all the time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that popped out from that survey was that it was the older workers that want to be back in the office. And I'm certainly in that category. And, I hate working from home. It's, I just don't have a fast enough internet connection, or the VPN that we use just isn't fast enough. I'm an impatient person. I can't wait around for that green bar to make it across. So I tend to, I lose files, all that stuff. That's incredibly frustrating. So yeah, I'll be back in the office. But one of the things that'll matter here is what CEOs think of productivity in the remote work world. So, we'll see how all that plays out. But it'll definitely be interesting to watch as we go forward.
Right, and that will have some impact on migration to the state. If people are able to work remote 100% of the time, then they may leave the state that they're living in and move to a nice, warm, sunny place like Tucson.
Yeah, absolutely. And the certainly talking a lot about those potential impacts, and one of the advantages that Arizona has, particularly if we think about comparing the cost of living here to LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, even Denver nowadays, is the housing affordability is so much more attractive here in Arizona and Phoenix and Tucson. Can you talk a little bit about, you've done a huge amount of research on that. Can you talk a little bit about what we have?
Sure. We have, housing affordability, we include both a housing affordability indicator that can be found in the economy category. Tucson has, amongst its peer metropolitan areas that we look at, Tucson is the second highest level of housing affordability, highest percentage of single family homes that are considered affordable when compared to those other 11 metros. And I think it's just under 70% offhand, 68%-ish of single family homes are affordable to someone earning the median family income. So keep in mind, median family income is over $60,000 for Tucson. So a little bit higher than kind of the individual income levels that we see. So we find that Tucson is affordable for those earning kind of that 60,000 and higher income bracket. We also include housing cost burden measure on the map dashboard that really breaks down the percentage of households that are paying more than 30% of their income in housing costs. That's rent, mortgage, insurance, utilities, things like that. And we find, as one would expect, that those housing cost burden rates really increase as you get into the lower incomes. But they increase disproportionately for those in Tucson, meaning that those in Tucson in the lower income brackets find it more difficult than their peers nationally to find affordable housing. So really kind of, there's two stories about what's going on in housing affordability in Tucson, and that's Tucson's really affordable, those kind of earning, in the high, medium to higher income brackets, but not affordable compared to national affordability rates in the lower income brackets. We also have a cost of living indicator on the map dashboard that shows that Tucson is a really affordable place to live relative to its other 11 pure metropolitan areas around the Western US. I think about 4% below the US is the cost of living. But when you break that out by rents or housing, it's like 10% or more than 10% below national housing costs. So a lot of information. You can find those housing affordability in the economy category. You can find cost of living in the quality of place category on the map dashboard.
Great. Well, we have a question on the travel and tourism industries and leisure and hospitality about how they've fared during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've written several articles, and you've done a lot of research on this, George. What we've looked at on the map dashboard is that Flagstaff was hit really hard. The leisure and hospitality sector was hit really hard in Flagstaff compared to Tucson and Phoenix. It's been hit hard across the state, across the nation, really, but Flagstaff was hit particularly hard. And do you want to share any of the insights you have on the research you've done?
Sure. As we expected, the travel and tourism sector got hit really hard. It bounced back a little bit over the summer, and it is recovering, but it's slow. And it'll continue to be slow until the vaccine is really widely available and most people have it, so that we all feel comfortable going back and doing all those things that we were doing before. I think the travel and tourism industry is going to be one of the last to fully recover. Overall, I think the state's headed for, in terms of employment, we should be back to where we were before the pandemic, sometime in the second half of 2021. Travel and tourism probably a little bit after that, but recovery is on the way. There is light at the end of the tunnel. So last question we have is about seasonality here in Tucson with respect to bankruptcies and that kind of thing. So you're right that in terms of travel and tourism, the high season here in Arizona is in the cooler winter months. Things slow down in the summer. The bankruptcy and then new business application data, that is seasonally adjusted, which takes care of that kind of normal seasonal variation. And with that, I think we're at the end of our questions. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you for the last word.
Okay, yeah, I just want to mention that some of that information on the tourism, leisure and hospitality you can find in the high frequency update on the map dashboard, and then also a lot more information in detail on Arizona's economy that you can just click on that link at the bottom of high frequency update and take you there. So yeah, thank you everybody for attending. If you haven't already, sign up for the newsletter. Great way to stay up to date on the next map talk that we'll have in the next month or two. And then if you thought this was worthwhile presentation, please share it with your colleagues. We'll have it posted on the MAP website later today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer.